Hey, before we start with this video, just wanted to give you a very brief tour of the PMP Lounge YouTube channel. That's youtube.com/PMP Lounge. This, as you can see, is the home. If you can go to videos, these are all the videos, and you can easily search among all these videos by quickly going into the search option and searching for a topic like project management plan, and all the relative videos to project management plan will show up. But the real treasure falls and is deep rooted in the playlist section. All these playlists contain deep information of respective topics. We make sure each of the playlists are up to date. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to PMP Lounge and begin your PMP journey with us. All right, hello and welcome to pmplounge.com. Today we are looking into define scope process. This is going to be a brief video about define scope process. Where does it fall? A brief introduction about it and why it is the next logical step after completing collect requirements. We will dive deep into this define scope process, and we are going to cover the inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques in our following videos. So subscribe if you haven't done so already. And as always, there will be a supporting article of define scope process at pmplounge.com. So feel free to go there and check that out. So let's get started with define scope. So the define scope process is part of the planning process group within the project scope management knowledge area. As you can see on the screen, it's highlighted in red. Define scope, again, it's a process which comes after collect requirements. So when you're doing the define scope process, when you're doing this process in your project, the general consensus and the general idea is that you would have already collected the requirements, and based on those requirements is when you are now defining your scope. So let's take a quick look in terms of definition and understanding. Define scope is the process of developing a detailed description of the project and product scope. So not just the product scope will also be defined as part of this process. That is what this process does. Now, it can also be considered as drawing the boundary of the project and finalizing the project scope. So you're not just you're developing a detailed description of the project scope and the product scope. But in addition to that, you are also defining a boundary around the project scope, right? And you're finalizing it. All of that in the define scope process itself. Now, there are certain points that you should always remember in terms of the define scope process. Like I said, this is a short and brief video, just an introduction of the define scope process. We are definitely going to have more videos on define scope, wherein we'll cover the inputs, outputs, tools, and techniques, and whatnot. So the first point to remember is that a clearly defined scope is extremely important to project success. As an ill-defined scope, a scope which is not defined the way it should be, will eventually lead to conflicts, rework, and stakeholder discontentment. Of course, nobody wants to work on a project that doesn't even have the project scope defined clearly, right? And when we talked about the boundary, right? We are also considering here the fact that this is this process, the define scope process, comes after collect requirements. So you've already collected all the requirements, and it is only fitting that you define the scope after you're done with the collect requirements process. But like I said, when we were talking about drawing the boundary of this project, right? What is the boundary of the project is basically it is what the third point says, wherein that the project scope is not just outlining what will be delivered as part of the project, but it is also laying emphasis on whatever that is excluded from the scope, right, will not be delivered. And that is the point about drawing a boundary of the project scope. We are making sure that we know what is going to be delivered, but whatever that is not part of the project scope and the product scope, The stakeholders need to understand that these items, whatever that is excluded from the project scope, will not be delivered, right? So when that boundary is drawn, and this is why defined scope is an extremely important process, because when that boundary is drawn, that is where conflicts, any kind of rework will be avoided at all times, right? Because everybody knows, everybody is on the same page, everybody knows what will be delivered, everybody knows the boundary of the project, and everybody knows what they can expect from the project just by going through what the scope is. And how do you come with the scope? Of course, through the defined scope process. So that's all that we had. Like I said, this is only an introduction. More videos will follow. Do check out the detailed article on pmplounge.com, which will be the link to it will be available in the description. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. Check us out on our social media, facebook.com/pmplounge and twitter.com/pmplounge. If you have any queries on PMP or anything related to project management, feel free to send that out to pmplounge@gmail.com. And as always, do check out the website pmplounge.com, your number one free resource for PMP certification and project management industry information. Thank you.